The Her Sports Show, live every Wednesday on YouTube and every podcast app.
Hello and welcome to the Her Sports Show. In this week's episode, we're joined by Sharon Hutchinson, who has been a huge advocate for women's sport. Sharon founded Sportswomen.ie, which ran until 2015, and she has certainly played her part in terms of changing the game for women in sport. We dive into a conversation around the landscape and how it has evolved over the past number of years. I'm delighted to be welcomed by Sharon Hutchinson, a huge female sports advocate, onto the show. How are you doing today, Sharon?
I'm great. Thanks, Niamh, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on. And, I know you had a huge contribution to women's sport in Ireland and trying to push things along a couple of years ago. So tell us a bit about your background and what you were doing for women in sport.
Well, I suppose it was kind of maybe 2010, 2009, around that time. I remember picking up the newspaper and, flicking through the sports page, because I always love going to the sports page. And it just kind of hit me, and I'm sure it's hit many before me, that there was just no women's sport in the sports section. And I remember writing a letter, I think it was the Sunday Times at the time, saying, geez, if someone came from outer space, they wouldn't know that women's sport existed at all. And then I had an opportunity then to go on, it was called the Pink Programme in CIT in Cork. And it was basically a women's entrepreneurship program for 6 weeks. And you had to come with an idea. So the idea I had was a website like yourselves, and I called it Sportswomen.ie. So I got a web designer, so I didn't have that skill to create the website. And I launched it then in January 2015. So that's 7 years ago now. And I basically just filled it with content from all the other NGBs. So I was replicating what was on all the other sites, but I was just putting it into one place. And, attending any conference I could go to, meeting the people that I suppose had the power or the influence to change things. And I was a one-person show, really, or a one-woman band for a good while. And through it then I met other people who had expertise in different sports, and they came on board as well, all voluntary, all of them. And I've made some great contacts and friends through that. And then, so I was doing it for 3 years, and I found it very difficult to monetize it. I just didn't have, I suppose, the skill set to go out there and, make money on it myself. But at the same time, I reckon, I did something for women's sport. I was involved with the RT Audience Council. It was just for a year. It's a group that RT have where they bring the ordinary person, I suppose, if you want to call it, together and to give their opinion on RT and all that. So I obviously was going in with my Women in Sport banner. And I would have met a few people in that organization that I definitely had an influence on. And I would say that, for example, now things like, Clean O'Leary and Fiona Coughlin came to a conference in Ballybunion, and that I had organised. There was a sports section in it, and they met. And from that, I believe that Fiona actually became a pundit at a men's game. So it was just to get that female person, talking about men's sport as well, because that's, it's not even just about women playing sport. It's about women being visible in the whole sporting arena. So I suppose there was a few things like that, and I just kept hammering on for 3 years. And then, I just got tired, unfortunately. Yeah. And I finished it. It was really difficult, because it was like my best friend. Sportswomen.ie was like my best friend, and I had to let it go though, because I'm all or nothing, and I just couldn't give it the energy that it needed. But at the same time, it definitely made a change. And then from there, other things like the 2020 campaign, yourselves, those things have happened. Unfortunately, COVID then came in, and I do think that took the steam out of the sail, or, the wind out of the sails there for a while. I think 2020 was a great campaign, and it probably didn't reach its full potential because of COVID. But look, we couldn't predict that,
So in terms of barriers, like what were some of the barriers that you faced? And I guess, do you think that, times have changed from 2009, 2010 to say when we obviously launched Her Sport in 2018? do you think that there was more opportunity maybe there? Like, were people more digitally ready? Were people more open-minded, or what have you kind of observed?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like, even in 2015, I looking back now, I was ahead of my time, ahead of the time.
Absolutely.
Which seems terrible thing to say in 2015, but I think I was just a bit early, and maybe you came in at the right time. I remember, was it Malachi Clark, and he had an article, and the heading was like, "Who cares about women's sport?" And I think that was the attitude back in the 2000s, early, and 2010, that decade, early part of that decade. So I think that was it. Who cares about women's sport?
Mm-hmm.
And then I do think, I think it's actually government now understand how important it is to give equality to women's sport. And when you have a big machine like government behind you, then things can happen. So like you can see, Sport Ireland are definitely promoting women's sport more. It's all about getting more women into leadership, roles. So the landscape has definitely changed. People's attitudes have changed. And then for like little, that's the little, for the LGFA, like that was huge, to put that kind of money into the sport. And you saw that the 30 whatever thousand, whatever it got, you probably have the number, but the audience numbers had increased, and that was
they keep increasing. I think it's up in the 50,000s now.
Yeah,
so we're exactly. heading towards that 82,000.
Exactly, and that's all down to promotion, watching posters. I don't know if you saw a video there the other day on LinkedIn. There was three little girls doing an interview. They were pretending that they were at a match on the sideline, and one girl was interviewing two others, and they were just gasped, but they were copying what they see on TV. So it's definitely more out there. Still a long way to go though. Now I'm still of the newspaper generation, and I know that will slowly fade, but if you still pick up a newspaper and look through it, still very little women's sport. I know you can find it online, but again, you have to go find it. It's not coming at you. So
yeah, I was going to say that when you mentioned the papers earlier on, like obviously you're saying that was the turning point for you, but unfortunately, we are still hearing those stories. We are still seeing that, like, we went and got a paper a couple of weeks ago, and again, no women's sport, and it's a lot more regular than you'd like it to be. Like it just shouldn't be happening at this stage. But for you, I suppose, like, what was sport like for you growing up? Like, where did your interest come from?
Well, I grew up in a very sporty house. My dad was very sporty, and he brought us to everything. I was the oldest of three, and he had us playing tennis and hockey, and we were swimming and all that. So I was very involved from a young age. I started hockey when I was about 11. So for me, I never really saw any inequality because it was there for me. I had the opportunity. Now I know there are many girls out there and boys that don't have the opportunity, but I did. And for me, I went to a hockey school, and I just was good at the sport as well. So I was able to develop and reach a high level playing the sport, which was good for me. So I suppose that's where, and I've always been on a sideline, or I've always loved the outdoors and just being active because it's good for you. So I suppose I thank my dad really for instilling that love of sport.
And in terms of your peers at the time, like, or I mean, from being that 11-year-old right up to now, like you're a mom, like how have you watched girls and women's relationship with sport change over the years?
Yes, well, for me, it wasn't obvious as a young person, because I thought everyone played sports because that's what I did. And I think that's what happens is, we're in our own little bubble. And, there was I started I called it Mothers and Others. I know the LGFA created that label, but I did one for hockey up here in the club that I'm in. And it was just bringing women back to the sport who played it before, but also for women who hadn't. And I remember one night, this woman coming to me, and she just said, "Sharon, just thank you so much. I never played sport as a child. My mother never encouraged us." And, so it was lovely to get that to give her that opportunity, but she was 40 plus before she got that opportunity. So, for me, I didn't see it because I was so involved. And I do think a lot of our high performing athletes, they're so consumed by their own sport, they
Yeah.
actually don't realize how important a role they do have. But I think, again, yeah, I was in that bubble, so I didn't really notice, I suppose, to be honest. And also, when I played hockey, we had a really good journalist, Ruth O'Mahony, who used to write in the Examiner, the Cork Examiner at the time, and she covered hockey. So we actually got coverage. I've got scrapbooks of all our matches and all that. So, but again, it depended on who was there at the time. Sometimes it doesn't get the coverage because there isn't anyone interested in doing it. So.
And in terms of do you think there's been a generational change? Are we heading in the right direction?
Yes, very much so. It's like anything, any change, it's slow. So it is going to be slow for some. You're going to say, oh, will they ever do this? Will they ever do that? It's going to take a while to get us to a place where it's equal with men's sport as such. But I think parents now are so much aware of how important sport is for their girls as well. So I think we're moving in the right direction. So I'm hopeful.
So, I mean, it's great that we are moving in the right direction. And obviously, you put in some of the groundwork there when you were doing it. I know you do still share some content on the Sportswomen.ie social media channels, and you've been involved in lots of things. And there's lots of other people that are trying to create change. We're obviously doing it every day here at Her Sport. We're trying to create change, but there are still different things that have to happen, and there's still lots of frustrations. We're hearing lots of stories across the country and around the world, and you think geez, have we not moved past some of these things? What are some of the biggest frustrations that you still see?
Well, for me, this might be a touchy subject, but for me, it's Gaelic, it's GAA. So the GAA is an all-male association, and lots of people in this country don't understand that the LGFA and the Camogie Association are separate entities to the GAA. And huge money has gone in to the GAA. Now, similarly, the Camogie Association, the LGFA get government money, but the amount of money that has been put into the GAA over the years from all the communities, all the grounds around the country belong to the GAA. They belong to that association, and a lot of females are still, finding it difficult to access that in an equal way. And I know the GAA own those pitches. I totally get it. It's in their ownership, so they should be able to do what they want with it. But that ownership came from communities over the last 100 odd years. And I just see, until there's equality in Gaelic games in Ireland, we're still behind. We're still in the dark ages, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I know that's fair, and it's something we actually discussed on the show a couple of weeks ago. And it is really about trying to get everybody to understand that, women and men, boys and girls, to understand exactly what's going on, and to understand the contribution that girls and women have actually had to the GAA for the past 100 years. People have always been involved in the community, while maybe not always playing. Yes. They have been involved in building and supporting the GAA and all the clubs and everything that goes with it for years and years. So it is time that people actually start to acknowledge that, start to understand it, and actually start to help the Camogie Association and LGFA. I mean, if they're all going to stay separate, it's time that everybody starts to help that and basically return the favor. And what you're saying, we have seen stories recently where high performance athletes or county teams aren't getting access to facilities. But we also see it across the country, where boys and men's teams are often prioritized over the women's teams, and it is that kind of age old saying that you have there, where it's oh, well, the GAA owns the pitch, and that's where people kind of stop with it. And it's everybody needs to be educated on why does the GAA own the pitch.
Exactly. And that education isn't out. Well, people don't know really, so.
And what are some of the other things? So in terms of media coverage, you've talked a bit about the papers, what about television? What about online? What do you think the state of play we are there, and how can we make some improvements?
We're getting there. Now, it was great to see the European soccer on TV. So that was fantastic. I obviously, hockey is close to my heart, so I know it was on. There was a couple of matches on, but they didn't really dedicate the time to it there, and the team did so well 4 years ago. So it was a pity that it wasn't taken on by RTE. I know they did in their other streams, but so there was that. So we still have a bit to go on the media front with regards to on TV and streaming and all that. But again, it's all down to the money that that women earn as well. And but I think I actually don't understand sponsors, because I think sponsors are missing out big time when it comes to women's sport. We like women in the world are the control. They control what we buy.
Household decision makers.
Yes, totally. So I just don't understand why sponsors just don't take it on, because they will get the return.
Yeah, like in terms of female teams and female athletes, like a lot of sponsors that are working with them are definitely seeing the return on investment. And I know you've already mentioned Little and the LGFA, which has been a huge success. And, as we can talk about the side of the decision makers, which is like, that's fact. And a lot of people know that. But also there's a lot of appreciation there. And I'm not saying that, men's teams and male athletes don't appreciate it, but it tends to be something that's really valued by the female athletes, because they're not getting it all the time or haven't experienced it all the time, that they really, really appreciate the support that they get from women's teams. And I've heard actually in local communities when, I heard of a business and they had moved towards supporting one of the women's teams, and they had supported the men's teams for years. And they said, where we got this opportunity, we decided that we would sponsor the jerseys of the women's team. And they said they were so appreciative and the support that they got, that they actually shifted over and stayed to continue supporting the women's teams. And they just said, obviously it was something that they wanted to do, but they said that the return that they got and the activation from the athletes, they were more than happy always to help with different things and to promote the business and that type of thing. So it's at local and national level that people are seeing that return. You mentioned the television and broadcasting things on television, and obviously, yes, women are in the workforce, men are in the workforce. Everybody's contributing to paying taxes, and there's one thing that I find interesting is actually the TV license. We're all paying it. What are your kind of thoughts on that? Where obviously it's predominantly male sport that's shown.
Yeah.
But we're actually paying our TV license as well. So what's the story? Where's the women's sport?
Exactly. And I think you have a good question there. But I suppose there's lots of underrepresented, people who are underrepresented on TV, that you could pick anything there now as well. And women's sport just happens to be one of them as well. And I suppose it's not until people demand it, they need to be demanding it from the broadcasters. I think we're not great for vocalizing what we want out there. I think women or men or whoever, interested in women's sport. I don't know.
Do you think there's a lack of understanding of the structures? Because it's something that never struck me for a long time. We're paying for some of these channels to be funded. It is state funded, government funded, funded by the people, per se. And if we have 50% of the population is male, 50% is female, and for the likes of something like sport, do you think that there's actually just a lack of understanding for people actually then to start vocalizing that we are paying our TV licenses, so can we push a bit more for what we want to see?
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't think people have actually thought about it too much, But I think you have a point. We need to get back what we put in.
Absolutely. In terms of where we go from here, what do you think are some of the next steps for paving the way for the girls and women of the future? I personally am trying to change things for the people of today as well, but so aware, as you said, that change will take time, and it's going to be a long time before we're going to see a level playing field that we're looking for. But what are some of the things that you think we can do now, or people can maybe just do in their everyday life to help create change?
Well, I think it's very important that we have to actually concentrate on the boys as well, as in we have to bring the boys to the women's game as well. It's not just bringing the girls. So it's for the boys as well, because I'll give you an example. I know a young fella, and he plays hockey, and he's afraid to be seen with a hockey stick on his shoulder because it's perceived as a girl's sport or women's sport. So that's not a good thing either. But if, you know, boys need to be, and men need to be brought along as well. And I think when you can get them to buy into it, and like, it is about developing the product though too. We do need to raise the You see, the problem as well, I think, with women's sport is we're competing against professional men's sport, and a lot of women's sport is amateur. You know, that we see, like, so like your, you know, your rugby and your soccer and all that. So, you know, there's a lot of, they're not very good. You know, you get that from time to time, because they're always comparing it to the professional setup, which a lot of the women don't, you know, they don't have. So that's a problem, all right, I think. We need to raise the standard in some sports for it to be a good product, because you do have to have a good product at the end of the day, and that's what's going to bring the money in. Like tennis is a good example of a sport that I think is pretty equal, although I'm sure if you get into the nitty gritty, it's still not. But
yeah, there's some prize money discrepancies there, we'll say, but they went through a huge shift with Billie Jean King, obviously.
Exactly, and how long has that taken?
50 yeah, no, quite an amount of time.
Yeah, 50 years, really. You know, you're talking about the 60s, so, you know, and that's how long it's taken for that sport, you know, and I think that's how long it's going to take. But I think as long as government keep backing, you know, women's sport, and also any funding that is government funding, there has to be an equality thing going on with the NGB. There has to be, you know, there's no question. And, you know, as long as government, you know, keeps that pressure on the NGBs to constantly promote equality, that will go a long big time. And then I think if we get the sponsors and the money, and at the end of the day, it's all about money. If you don't have the money, you can't promote, you can't develop. So we just have to, you know, get those sponsors in. You know, like again, I know I'm going back to hockey because that's what I know best, but I would say Softco, it must be the best money they ever spent. I think I never heard of Softco before 4 years ago, but they were on the front of every newspaper, you know. So like, that's an example. And then even just Lidl, all their promotions that they have, I love all their, you know, club stuff. You know, if you get so many tokens, you get a full set of jerseys, all that kind of stuff. If you can do that, not just with Gaelic, with other sports as well, because I do feel a lot of the other sports being neglected sometimes because it's all about the GA and Gaelic, you know, camogie and football. So it can be difficult for the other sports. But I think, look, we just have to keep going the way we're going. It's slow, but it's all about getting more money into the sport and government backing, I think.
At local level, what do you think people can do? Whether they're on a committee or a parent or a child that's playing, or an adult that's playing, what are some of the things that you would advise people to do?
Well, for example, I still feel we need to get more women into the coaching side of things. They're pretty good on the administration side, I think. If you go into clubs and that kind of thing, there's a lot of women helping that way. But coaching, it's still mostly male, you know, dominated. And I think we need to start encouraging, and again, going back to the NGBs, they need to have programs that are for
something to be fair to Sport Ireland and a number of the NGBs, they have been pushing that over the past couple of years, and that's great to see. So hopefully we'll see that continue and spread out into more sports over the next couple of years.
Exactly. And again, just more women in, you know, on committees, in the chair role, you know, in the bigger roles within the committee. Again, women are great for just kind of sitting, you know, on the sidelines and doing all the work kind of thing. So it's just for women to just push themselves a bit more.
Have the courage.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, you know, sport is, you know, at the grassroots level, there's lots of girls playing sport. For me, it's the girls who don't have the opportunity, who don't have parents that are going to bring them to the pitch. It's those girls that don't have the opportunities. So I suppose that's where the schools come in then, maybe that, you know, you've sport through school and that, you know. Again, though, you know, you're still looking at very short PE times in a lot of secondary schools. So, and again, that teenage years, how to keep them in sport. So, you know, it's to look at that as well and try and keep them there.
Yeah, and then there's obviously the things of going to the matches, immersing yourselves in exposing people and young people to some of the sports so that they actually can believe that they do belong there and that type of thing as well. I do have one question. It might be a tough one, and I don't know the correct answer to myself, to be fair.
Yeah.
We've obviously spent a long time funding men's sport from the state. You're talking about government grants that are coming in. Do you think that there should be a reflection on the money that we have invested and the opportunity that we have given men over the past 100 or 150 years and the state funding that has gone into it? Do you think there should be some sort of retrospective funding essentially being put in place for women's sport? Because obviously if you invest in the sport, you will see something kick forward, and we're obviously seeing that with sponsors. But does the state and does the government actually owe women investment to push things on? Money spent on marketing can make a huge advancement for a number of these sports, and obviously there are some women in sport grants, but when we're looking at what you're talking about there, say the GAA, the Camogie Association, the LGFA, the funding is not the same. What are your kind of thoughts on that? It's a tough one.
I agree with you. I totally agree. I think women need to get need a boost as such. I don't know if you've ever seen that cartoon. You probably have, where they're standing on the same level box, but they're all different heights, and they're looking over a fence. So obviously the tall person can see over the fence, and then the other cartoon has the boxes are different sizes, and now they're all the same height. And that's what we need to do. We need to boost, what's there. And I would totally agree with you. If the money was there, it should be put into women's sport and bring them up to that level.
Yeah, because I think it's something that if we did it over a couple of years, like if there was a plan to be pushing things forward. And as I said, I know in Sport Ireland there are some grants specifically for women in coaching, or a couple of other female specific initiatives, but it's not obviously the same amount of money that we've been investing over decades that's gone into funding men's sport. And as we said, this money is coming from the community.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree totally with
you. We'll see what other people's feedback is on it. It's certainly a tough one, but thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us and sharing your story, and obviously your contribution to changing things for women's sport over the number of years. We know you're a huge advocate, and you've definitely played your part. So hopefully between us all, we can see something change over the next couple of years.
Not at all. And thanks a million for having me, and well done on all the work that you're doing as well, Neil.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Her Sports Show. A reminder that you can catch up on this episode and every episode on YouTube, across podcast platforms, and across all our social media channels. If you're enjoying the Her Sports Show, be sure to subscribe on YouTube as well as on all podcast apps.
The Her Sports Show, live every Wednesday on YouTube and every podcast app.